Welcome to On the Bubble Podcast, episode 68. I'm your host, Tsubasa J. Ueda, and with me is my co-host, Yuki Lee Bender. Today we're going to be talking about Battle Hardened Top 8 and Week 2 of the ProQuest and what heroes are doing well in Classic Constructed and honestly what we think of the meta. But before we do that, how was your ProQuest this week?
My progress was not bad. I was playing KO once again. I made top 8 3 and 2. It was a smaller PK with about 18 players, and I ended up losing to a max, kind of combo max. So I don't know. PK was pretty good. I lost a combo max in top 8. I think my other losses were an Azalea, who managed to red in the ledger both my blood rushes, red in the ledger to Lace, pretty good. Lace with inertia, and then I lost to Uzuri. It was fairly close game, but wasn't quite able to pull it out.
I was actually at the same ProQuest, and I borrowed Victor from Yuki. I also top 8'd, and my loss in top 8 was also to the max deck that was the combo max deck, and that matchup felt unwinnable for me, so they just like pitch stacked like a 40 some damage turn with like triple high octane, and I'm just like, I don't know how this is winnable for me.
Yes, so it feels like the metagame's kind of really like characterized right now by there not really being a true aggro deck. Like KO can put out some pretty good damage, but that's kind of like the most aggressive deck. Maybe you could say like Azalea is an aggressive deck, but not really like a traditional aggro deck that we've seen in Flesh and Blood before, like like Fi or Briar or Chain or Viscerai. And so I feel like people are kind of realizing that there's room for these kind of like setup or like combo-ish decks to shine. And we saw that in our local PQ with Max. It looked like Max picked up a couple wins according to the ProQuest meta, is kind of in the other category. And we also saw other decks, like Kano is still around, of course. Maybe not doing quite as well as he was the previous season, but still up there and well represented. And even decks like Katsu shifting away from being an aggro deck into more of like a burst combo deck. And I think this is sort of like a response to all these like hyper efficient mid-range piles that want to do some blocking and some attacking and maximize their hand value by doing a combination of the two. And so if you're able to just block and set up and then have a game-ending turn, that's one way to kind of exploit this metagame that I think we're starting to see players take advantage of.
And I think we can also see it with like the rise of like Teklo getting a couple of like 5 PQ wins in week 2, which is like a significant amount of PQ wins. Like Teklo was like one of the heroes that I thought wouldn't get that many points in like the next coming months, but I got proven wrong. There's like 5 people who brought that deck to a win. That's kind of sick.
Yeah. And it makes a lot of sense. Like Teklo lost one of his worst matchups in Dromai. He's also very weak to arcane damage, but Kano currently still doing well, but maybe a little bit suppressed, probably due to the rise of Prism, which I'm sure we'll be talking about as we get into the episode. But yeah, Teklo kind of well positioned and also able to exploit those decks in a similar but slightly different way. So it is an interesting kind of like wrinkle that we've seen in adaptation, and I'm curious to see where the metagame continues to go, because this is kind of our first look at the post-Dromai Living Legend metagame. This is the first week that we've had since she's gone. So cool to see that adaptation, and I wonder if we're going to see more of a shift to combo, or if there's going to be other adaptations that happen as well.
Do you want to do a quick Patreon shout out before we move on?
As always, thank you to all of our patrons. You can check us out on patreon.com/onthebobble. We really appreciate all of you who give back to the show and support us and make this possible. It really does make a huge difference. There's content on there like articles, deck guides to help you get ready for PQs. In particular, KO is up there, and also going to be getting an update shortly. So keep your eyes out there for that. And Titanium Bobble and Up members will get access to all those extra contents. So thank you so much to all of our patrons, and thank you to all of our listeners, even if you're not able to give back. We appreciate all of you.
Let's talk about the most winning deck at the ProQuest for week 2, which is KO. Like, that's the deck that you brought. Do you think this deck is just like the best deck in the format, or do you think that other decks could be more powerful, or like what's your take on KO right now?
KO is just like a good numbers deck. I think it's hard for KO to ever be bad. He's just like we talked about it previously, but he's just like has such good fundamental flesh and blood, like good numbers, good burst damage, good equipment. Kind of has gameplay into like everything. Like I don't think he has any like super terrible matchups. Some of the warriors I think are I think the warriors in general are good into him, and there's maybe things that are good into him, like the max combo when I didn't have smashing performance was pretty good into me, but also you can tech for it pretty easily if you want to. I think smashing performance would clean up that matchup quite a bit. So I think he's just like very very well rounded, very consistent, and a very good value deck. But I don't think he's like Lexi from the previous metagame with Lexi, where Lexi was like very clearly the best deck. And I think if you weren't playing Lexi, you were honestly likely giving up some percentage points. She was just kind of like clearly the best thing to be doing. Maybe Dromai was also up there. There's like maybe an argument for Dromai, but like Lexi Dromai were like head and shoulders above basically everything else in my opinion. Whereas I think the difference between KO and at 15 wins and Azalea at number 2 at 14 wins and even in most of these other heroes at the top here, I think is pretty small and probably mostly dependent on your local meta. So KO well rounded, but a little weak into warrior. If I had a meta game where I knew I was going to be playing against only warriors, KO's probably not the deck I would bring.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair. What is KO's worst matchup? Is it just Warrior, or does it have any other bad matchups right now?
I think it's pretty much just warrior. I think KO is reasonably happy to play into most other things. I guess there's like some like I see like the 5 Teklos. I wonder if Teklo has a decent KO matchup. I'm not totally sure. I haven't actually played that matchup, but I think in general all of the warriors are quite good into him. Probably like Bolton and Dawnblade Dory are your worst matchups, and then the dual wield warriors are closer, but still a little bit unfavored. Azalea is reasonable into KO, but I think it's pretty close.
Yeah, I guess it depends on where their disruption arrow hits and if that actually disrupts you or not, right?
Yeah. It's always hard to gauge Azalea when you're playing an aggressive deck because when she has it, she often just wins by a lot. But then sometimes she doesn't have it and she can just kind of explode. So the games are very volatile. But I think overall it is fairly close for KO. So yeah, just like very well rounded, good into most stuff is kind of what I would say about KO. So if you're somebody that's been playing KO and you like KO, I think you should just keep playing KO unless you have a reason to switch, like your local metagame has been really hostile to him, or you want to play something else, or you think something else is better positioned.
One more question I have about the ProQuest stuff before we move on would be Azalea. Like, what do you think about Azalea? I know a couple of weeks ago, like there was the calling in the PTA event double win on Azalea? Is that right, or was it a battle hardened in a PTI event?
I'm not entirely sure. There was definitely calling. Brody Spurlock won the calling in Phuket on Azalea. I'm not sure about the second one.
I think that same weekend it was like a double Azalea win with Brody in it. So
Okay. Yeah, Azalea, very strong deck with Dromai gone. Maybe has like a little bit of room to change things around, although she probably needs some poppers for Prism still, so maybe the deck doesn't change that much. But just overall, Azalea pretty well positioned. I think Bravo really falling out of the metagame. We see Bravo's kind of been like just like such a pillar of the metagame for so long. Like even when he hasn't been great, he's been like kind of okay. I don't think Bravo has ever been like bad. You know what I mean? Like he's been like middle of the pack, but he's not been bad. But right now I think Bravo is like pretty weak. And he's in the other category. So we have like Riptide getting more wins than Bravo, which is like kind of crazy, right? And I think that's super good for Azalea, honestly. Like one of Azalea's worst matchups is Bravo. You can't deal with the all the disruption and the dominate, and he has a bunch of armor for you to chew through, and he can play D reacts. But Bravo's kind of fallen off, and we've seen Victor pick up steam instead. And the thing is, Azalea's matchup into Victor is much better. I'm not saying it's great, but it's a lot more playable because Victor kind of can't afford to fill his deck full of D reacts because he needs to win his clashes. And if you're like dominating against Victor, like that can be pretty bad for that deck sometimes. So Azalea like surprisingly good into Victor, and I think she's getting kind of a lot of equity from that. She's also like I think pretty reasonable into the dual wield warriors because of the frailty tokens, and again the dominate to go over the top of these decks that really want to be blocking and converting their hand. And if you say, well, you know, you have a handful of D reacts and you get to block with one of them, and here's a dominated arrow, like that's not fantastic for you. So I think that Azalea, it makes sense that she's doing well because she's pretty good into all these decks, and in addition to that, she's like solid into KO. So just like very powerful hero, gets to play Codex of Frailty. Death Dealer is a hell of a card. Yeah, I think Azalea is a great choice, and I'm not surprised to see her doing so well.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough. Fair enough. It feels like she took the Bravo spot of being the disruption on hit hero kind of thing.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think she's just able to go a little bit taller and be a little bit more aggressive and punch through these really defensive decks. Whereas Bravo typically wasn't as efficient on offense. Like Crippling Crash, you're playing, like if you're dominating Crippling Crash, you're spending like 4 cards for 11 damage, right? And the problem is you look at some of these top decks, KO, Victor, Kasai, Rhinar, Dorenthia, they all just have giant fridges and it's like a ton of armor to work through. And I think the problem that Bravo has is like you need to send so many of these big dominated attacks that aren't very efficient to just get through their armor. And then there's also in a lot of those decks D reacts to work through on top of that. And you're just kind of like too slow by the time you get there. Whereas Azalea has effects like Remorseless and Release the Tension to deny D reacts from Arsenal. She's able to inertia so that you can't Arsenal D reacts, and she's just able to go much taller because of all her pumps and because of Death Dealer's draw a card effect. So I think you're absolutely right that Azalea is doing a little bit better. And I think a lot of it is because she can kind of get around that armor. And she even has stuff like Drill Shot to target the opponent's armor. So I think that, yeah, Azalea filling very much the niche that Bravo did by being like a little bit more aggressively slanted and a little bit better at kind of going over and punishing these mid-range decks.
That's fair. I hate Drill Shaw. That's like the bane of my existence ever since Lexi was out, and I'm just like, whenever Lexi drill shotted you, you just like it felt awful, no matter what happened.
Yeah, it's a very powerful on hit, and then if they have the trick to push, if you block it, and then they have the trick to push it over, it can be.
Oh no, no bad memories with Rain Razors. Oh,
Yeah. So Azalea doing well, and Victor continuing to do well. We saw him do well last season. Not too surprising. Prism doing well. I think Prism's kind of like the big one that we're going to talk on. We'll talk about her during the Battle Hardened too, but just to recap, like she's the third most winning deck, tied with Victor at 13 wins. So KO's at the top, 15, Azalea 14, Prism and Victor at 13. Then we have like Kasai 11, Reiner 8, Kano 7, Dory 6, Katsu 6, Bolton 6, Teklo 5, and then it's pretty small from there. But yeah, Prism, third place, most winning deck. And not only that, we saw Prism win both the Battle Hardened in San Francisco as well as the PTI event attached to that, in the hands of Oliver Fee and Zach Wallach. And I believe that Zach was on almost the identical list to Oliver. I think he changed like 2 cards, is what I heard. So there's definitely something to that list. We'll be kind of doing a deep dive into, well, not a deep dive into that list, but we're going to be taking a look at all the Battle Hardened lists and talking about them. But yeah, Prism is a deck that I think is like very much the talk of the town right now on a lot of people's radar, and something that you should be practicing into and accounting for in your testing. And I think it makes a lot of sense. She is good into a lot of these mid-range decks. She's able to build up a board state and kind of punish these mid-range decks. And I think that she's getting right now some equity for people not knowing how to play into her. But I think she's also just like super, super, super powerful. Her auras are hard to deal with. She can draw an obscene amount of cards with Tome of Divinity and the Soraya, the Angel of Erudition. And she can just like really kind of go crazy, and just like go way over the top. So yeah, Prism, a deck that has been popping off a little bit, and I expect that we will continue to see do well. And I think that she's probably the biggest reason we see Kano's win share dropping down a little bit, down to 7 wins this week.
Do you wanna just start talking about the top 8 list for Battle Hardened then? I think we can just start by saying congrats to Oliver for winning the Battle Hardened on Prism. It's kind of sick. Like, Prism has been underplayed. It's like people's been choosing, at least all the illusionist players been choosing to play Dromai because that deck was a little bit stronger, I think. And then the moment that Dromai goes away, all of these illusionist players just move straight into Prism and, show why, like, show that this deck is actually really strong and playable.
Yeah, I'll give Oliver a shout out. Friend of mine and good friend of mine, and also teammate. Oliver's like, if I think of like who I know that likes Prism and is like the biggest Prism fan, it's definitely Oliver. Oliver was actually playing Prism at PTLA, so he's just kind of been on Prism. He thought Dromai was better, but he very much prioritizes having fun and playing decks that he enjoys, and so he decided to bring Prism for that event, and he's been working very very hard on that hero. And little known fact, but way back in the day, Oliver was the one who got Prism, the original Prism, her first Living Legend points and her first PQ win, and sort of popularized the Vestige Tome Aura build, whereas before people had mostly been doing Herald aggro, whereas Oliver had the Aura package and the Aura gameplay, which really kind of like, I think, was the de facto way to play Prism going forward from there. So Oliver, a very great Prism player, has been playing even old Prism for ages, and not surprised to see him do well, and very happy for him. Maybe we're going to take a quick look at his deck list. We're just going to kind of talk about them. We're not going to go through all the cards since this is primarily an audio format, but you can check them out on the fabtcg.com/decklist page and search Battle Hardened San Francisco, and you can see Oliver's Prism deck. First thing that's notable about Oliver's Prism deck, it has Iris of Reality as well as Luminaris Angel's Glow. We kind of got Luminaris Angel's Glow in the new set in Heavy Hitters in the expansion slot, and this kind of generated a lot of hype around Prism because no longer did you have to pay resources to get Go again. You just, so long as you've pitched a yellow, your first Herald and your first Angel each turn get Go again. And this weapon seemed very obviously powerful. But then there's kind of the question of like, well, okay, what do we do about the decks that have poppers? A lot of people tried to rely on the Arclight Sentinel loop. So the idea is you have like a Genesis out and an Arclight Sentinel, and then they break the Arclight Sentinel, then you attack with your Angel of Rebirth, put the Arclight Sentinel on top, and you can just like keep looping Arclight Sentinels by rebuying it with Angel of Rebirth. And the reason you need the Genesis is to fuel your soul, because every time you attack with Angel of Rebirth, you need to be able to pay a soul to put the Arclight on top. So a lot of people are kind of leaning in on this loop. And while this loop is in Oliver's deck and can be achieved, he is also opting to use Iris of Reality in a lot of matchups and play almost like a full Aura plan. So he's playing Luminaris in some matchups and then Iris in others, and using that to kind of deal with some of those problematic decks that have a lot of poppers, like Guardian, for example, rather than trying to go the Luminaris only route. So that was pretty innovative, and I'm curious to see going forward if his list will get adopted or if people will continue to favor the Luminaris route, or if we'll see both of them. I'm kind of curious to see how the lists develop.
I see, I see. Honestly, I don't have that much knowledge about Prism, Awakener, or Soul, but this is the image of the deck that I was more familiar with. I think at calling Las Vegas last year, I played against a very similar list of this when I was on Bravo, and they were on only on Iris of Reality because that's what because Luminaris Angel's Glow wasn't a card back then. This was the kind of strategy that they were playing before,
Yes.
and maybe what Luminaris Angel's Glow did was move this deck away from this like aura plan too much that it lost some of its like strength there.
Yeah, I think the problem is that like the auras are pretty good into decks like Guardians, but then your auras are really not good into some of the like aggressive ninja decks and things like that, where they're able to clear your auras and pressure really hard. But the Herald plan is good into those decks, right? If they don't have that much armor, they don't block that well. Your Herald's threatening to get the tutor the angels on hit, and you have the free go again from Luminaris Angel's Glow is incredibly powerful.
You know something that's kind of interesting to me is that a lot of these heralds are in blue and yellow. Is there a reason why we're not playing like the red versions of the heralds?
Yeah, so typically the dedicated Luminaris Angels Glow deck list will play a larger number of red heralds. Oliver opts for only three of them. He has the three Herald of Triumphs and nothing else, and then two Sync Belows as well. And the idea is just that you need a lot of blues to support your Iris gameplay, because the Iris takes a blue every time that you want to swing an aura for four go again. So we see him on 27 blues, it looks like, and a good chunk of these are the Heralds as well as Angelic Wrath, which notably are light blues and turn on or work well with Vestige of Soul, which is the only chess piece that he's running. So he's not running Empyrean Rapture, which again is something that's the one that lets you flip for free if a flip you can flip for free if a Herald has gone to your soul this turn. And yeah, so Oliver instead favoring Vestige, which gives you an extra resource when you pitch a light card if a card's been put into your soul, and that helps you play all your auras out. It helps you play Tome of Divinity, which I believe is just always sideboarded in this deck list, and lets you support that Iris gameplay. So the more dedicated Herald list with Luminaris Angel's Glow will typically have some extra red heralds and a lower blue count, and then Oliver's list has a higher blue count to support all the auras and the iris and the tomes.
Yeah, no, I this deck looks really sweet. Are you planning on playing Prism anytime soon?
I've actually already put the deck together and started playing it a little bit. I was playing it on Talishar last night and getting destroyed by Reinar. And then I asked Oliver, what do I do against Reinar? And he said, oh, yeah, Reinar wasn't in there. You play auras. And I was trying to play Luminaris into it. So, you know. So far, my experience on this deck has been like I play a matchup, it feels doomed. I ask Oliver what to do, and then I start winning.
Wow, the actual experience difference.
Yeah, I think the deck is like quite hard to play. There's definitely some differences between playing auras with Iris compared to playing auras. Like if you played old Aura Prism with original Luminaris, where all your auras swing for free, and you have 40 life, it plays quite differently because you can kind of like go really, really low and then just like pitch a yellow attack with your board. Whereas Iris actually needs blues in hand to convert. Like every aura you swing costs a blue, so you actually need to prioritize your life total that much. That much more, and you don't really need like five auras on the board. Like having like one or two is kind of fine because then you just have your weapon. Like once you like if you have one aura on the board, like you're just a guardian. If it's like a shimmers and they're ignoring it, like you have like a you just have like a Titan's Fist that grows every turn, and then sometimes you draw no blocks, but you know, we don't talk about that.
Yeah, I guess the weakness of this deck is that it plays a bunch of no blocks, and if you draw them together, you could blow up against some aggro decks. But I think, as you said earlier in the episode, not that many aggro decks in the format now, so maybe it's the time for Prism to shine. Honestly.
Yeah, I think it is a great metagame for Prism, and I think we'll continue to see her do well. But I do think that she's a deck that like rewards reps, and if you want to take her, you know, put in the time to learn her first, practice the key matchups. That's something that I'm going to be doing in the coming days, hopefully. And yeah, I look forward to playing this deck. Honestly, I don't know how many of our viewers this applies to, but this really gives me the old school Prism vibes, like back in like Monarch Chain days before we got the zero cost auras, and she switched to like playing Tunic counter and 27 auras. She just like only had the light auras, and you played Vestige and Tome, and this deck reminds me so much of that, and it's honestly really sweet and really nostalgic. So Yeah, I've been having a lot of fun with this deck actually. I really like it, and I encourage you to check it out because honestly, one of the best ways to know how to play against a deck is learning how to play it yourself. And I think that knowing how to play into Illusionist is like the most important thing if you want to beat it. Is understanding their game plan, understanding their board state, understanding what's important to them. Like it's all super super important. So honestly, I would encourage everybody to try out this deck list and give it a try. I think that even if you don't end up playing it at a PQ or you have no intention of playing it at a PQ, just playing Prism is a great way to learn how to play against Prism.
That's fair. That's fair. I agree with you completely. Maybe I play Prism this weekend.
I might also, if I can get her to a place where I'm comfortable. We'll see.
No playtest Yuki. Don't playtest Yuki. Go in blind.
I can do the J strat. The J strat is you learn to play the deck in Swiss, so that when you get to top eight, you know how to play the deck. The only problem is like you might get different matchups.
Yeah, but then you can guess. Some most of the matchups are kind of similar. Azuri and Guardian kind of the same deck.
Yeah, I guess so.
We'll
We'll see.
see.
We'll see. Maybe I play Prism. Maybe I play Prism. She seems pretty fun. I probably either play Prism or KO. We'll see. Anyways, we can carry on to the second place deck list. Victor Goldmane in the hands of Patrick, longtime Guardian player. Also, this like before we jump into the deck list, just like very cool top eight here. We have I don't think we ever read it out, but we have one KO, one Prism, one Betsy, which is kind of wild, a Dash IO, a Dash IE, Doranthea, a Kano, and a Victor. So all one ofs, no repeat heroes, and just like a super, super diverse metagame, which is really cool to see. I think to some degree that's expected with like kind of a fresh meta with Dromai going, but I wonder where the coming weeks are going to go, if it will narrow some or not. But anyways, on to Patrick's Victor deck list. Nothing too crazy here. I think Victor's a deck that has largely been kind of solved. He is favoring Tunic. I know some people are running Tech Blading, but this is a Tunic based list. Does have Ramparts in there for the dash matchup, presumably, and pretty standard. There's like a yellow pummel, which is kind of interesting. So going up from just the 3 red pummels to also having a yellow pummel in there. Pretty light on D reacts, just 1 Sink Below and 1 Staunch Response at red, and then 3 Sigil of Solace, which again is kind of a little bit of a spicy card in Victor, but honestly, I kind of like it. It looks like this deck is looking to kind of have some mind games because it has the 5 disables, the 3 disables, 3 command and conquers so that you can CNC pummel or disable pummel off of the Tunic counter. And then you have the 4 pummels, and then you also have the Sigil of Solaces to threaten a pummel and then just Sigil of Solace if your opponent overblocks. Or just you can represent a pummel and then you just have a Sigil of Solace, which is like sometimes a bit of a beating. So yeah, overall pretty standard. But I do like the inclusion of the yellow pummel and the sigils to just kind of like lean into that pummel game plan even more. And he also has like some Clash of Vicars, which probably help fuel the CNC pummel and disable pummels because those are like 2 and 5 cost.
Yeah. I think the biggest card that's missing from this deck will be Terra Sunder. I kind of agree with this. I played Victor, as I said last week, and man, I didn't realize how swingy the clashes can get in Victor until I played with it, and man, the cards without power can be so devastating when you see it on top. Mostly cards like Terra Sunder. Just having cards that have power seems super good, but then at the same time, you still can't cut cards like Tesla Strength and Pummels. I kind of like this idea of like going even heavier on Pummels and then cutting the Terrace Unders and just try and beat them up on the first cycle.
Yeah, it does make a lot of sense, and it does kind of lean into Victor's strengths. We already kind of saw like the blue pitch list at PTLA go this direction. I think they were down to 1 Terrace under. So yeah, definitely Victor's, I think, as a whole have been prioritizing the clash consistency, and we see 33 blues in this deck, which is kind of around what people have been playing. Like 32 to 34 blues is like usually what we see in victors these days. um yeah, we also notably see time skippers as a piece of equipment. Assume this is for Prism to be able to beat the loop. So if a Prism starts looping you, you can pop time skippers, attack the Arclight Sentinel, then hammer the Angel of Rebirth so that they can't keep buying back ALS. So that's just like an onboard way to break the loop. And if you're, you know, maybe a tech card for people to think about, I think time skippers is like any deck with a reasonable number of blues can play time skippers if getting looped by Prism is a problem.
That's fair. That's fair. I think yeah, been seeing more and more time skippers in people's decks, and yeah, I think it's just to beat Prism, and it seems like a very good card to beat Prism. So honestly, it might become a staple soon. Time skippers.
And I guess this is probably where like a deck like Oliver's deck gets some equity, where if your opponent boards in time skippers to beat your loop, but you're not even trying to loop them because you're not playing Luminaris and you're just playing Iris. I mean, like time skippers still has some uses. They can like use it to break two auras, but it's not fantastic, right? So
Yeah. Well, the biggest thing is that now they don't have civic steps, so they lose 3 health.
yeah, which is pretty big.
You wanna move on to the next list? This is gonna be my most interested. Like, this is the list that I'm most interested. It's Betsy skin in the game, and this looks like just like a pure fatigue guardian list that like this is like the kind of list that I love playing, where it plays like a bunch of one ofs, it plays a bunch of stance responses. This deck plays 2 withstands and a steadfast and remembrance, and this is like brother in arms. Like these are all cards I love to play, and I think the most interesting card in this list here will be Nerves of Steel. Do you know why this deck plays Nerves of Steel?
My guess is for dual wield warriors. Dual wield warriors can sometimes kind of grind you out because they get just like kind of math wise, if you're swinging your hammer, they're able to cover it up with like a card and dynamos. You're taking one card from them and you're not leaking damage. And at any time they're doing saber, like sure they might like spend a card to get the go again, but like often that card's getting power, and so they might like trade a card for like 2 cards blocking or like 3 cards blocking. So you're going like -2 on cards and they're going -1 on cards. So like yeah, their weapon's getting 2 cards every time they swing twice. Your weapon's only getting 1 card, so you're prone to getting fatigued. But then with Nerves of Steel, you can, and I'm assuming this is why Naive chose to go Betsy, because you get access to Good Time Chapeau, which is another piece of temper equipment in the head, and you can, if you have a Nerves of Steel out, you can potentially like block 2 on the first attack and then block even like 4 on the next attack, or even 5, because this is like a dedicated Rampart list. So if their baseline is like, Hot Streak, Blade Runner, Saber for 5, you can just like cover that up with equipment with your 4 pieces of with your 2 pieces of equipment, and then so and Rampart on the second swing and 1 piece of equipment on the first swing. So that blocks like 2 and 5, and then if you have a D react, you're just like able to hold that up if they go over the top with like Blade Flurry or whatever.
I think my favorite part about Nerves of Steels is that it kind of combos the gauntlets of Iron Will. And against like these warriors that's playing reaction that pumps that reaction step, once you block with the gauntlets of Iron Will, their pumps get -1. And then you play nerves, and then you can take the temper counter off the gauntlets again and then block with it again. So like you can like keep on having this card blocking for like pseudo 3 against warrior. That's kind of cool.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely seems very powerful. I don't know if there's like other spots that he's also playing it. Warrior's the most obvious one to me because their output is like so predictable. They're not very good at going over the top, especially if you have D reacts and you're trying to stop them. And they sometimes have trouble like converting their whole hand. So Nerves of Steel as a way to target that makes a ton of sense to me. We also see him with Buckle in there, so he can probably like try to line up a Buckle on their dynamos.
I would also assume that the Nerves of Steel comes in against someone like Ozuri or like Katsu and stuff like that with like weapons that attack for less than or 2 or less, right? So, even if
Mm,
you block a piercing weapon from Azuri, it's fine because you block for 2 and your cards don't get the temper counter on it, so it won't get destroyed. And I think that's fine.
it's interesting. I think against Katsu, you like almost certainly can't play Nerves of Steel. They're just going to be too good at making you leak damage. Uzuri is like a little tricky. I think like a real weakness of Nerves of Steel into Uzuri is that they can just like flick knives if they really want to get rid of it.
Oh, yeah, you're right, you're right.
Because your hero just needs to be dealt damage and then it gets destroyed, and then the temper and battle warren minus counter check isn't until the chain closes actually. So basically, like if you build a long chain and you block with your stuff and you're relying on nerves of steel and then you take a damage somewhere, you're kind of sad. And I think Uzuri with like shreds and flick knives is like, she probably doesn't care too much about this card if I had to guess, but I don't know. I haven't played this deck, so I don't know.
You have a very good point. You have a very good point. At least to us, it seems like just like a cyborg card against warriors, right?
Yeah, and it's very likely just part of the blue place. Blue block three cost.
Oh yeah, this blocks for 3. Great, awesome.
Yeah. You can just have it in your deck, and then it gives you some equity into a very popular matchup. Seems solid and some cool deck building from Naib. Kind of like well known. I've seen him take like a lot of like off meta choices that are like these like fatigue decks. It seems very very good player and very in line with what I know of him. So yeah, cool to see him doing well. I'm going to kind of move through these next deck lists a little quicker. We have Tyler Horsepule on Dash IO, a very well known player, lots of results. Not surprised to see him continuing to do well. Dash IO, though, a little bit of a spicy choice. Notably, he's on Mage Master boots with no Achilles accelerator. I assume the Mage Master boots is a combo with the Tome of Findle. Sort of an interesting choice. A lot of people, I think, rely on Achilles because you can just like boost and then play Tome of Findle, but I guess Mage Master Boots lets you keep an extra card. Like you don't need to spend a card from hand to boost to get the action points. So technically, Mage Masters will gain you like one more life and give you some more options. But definitely an interesting choice that kind of stood out to me. We also see some other stuff. Like I saw a lot of decks either prioritizing BIOS update to get out cards like Teclo Pounder, which is in the deck, or relying on the Tome of Findle package, but typically not both of them, because often like if you're using BIOS update, you might want to arsenal it and then wait until you see a good hit on top to boost away. But Tyler playing just kind of like all of it. Like he has BIOS update, he has Tome of Findle, he has Teclo Pounder, he even has Max Velocity in there. So he kind of like has all the ceiling cards in this deck. And I wish that there was like coverage of his gameplay, because yeah, my understanding from talking to people building Dash.io and from my gameplay with Dash.io kind of back around Worlds was that people kind of liked having maybe like one of these packages, but he's just kind of like playing all of them, which is super interesting. I wonder if like some are for certain matchups or if he's just like, I don't know, just full max ceiling and sometimes you break. It's pretty interesting though.
One of the most off meta card here would be Fuel Injector. This is just like a infinite loop with the Symbiosis shot, and that's about it, right? So this is basically a anti-fatigue plan for himself, where he won't get fatigued as long as there's a Fuel Injector in the deck. Is that just like, I guess, for like warriors and guardians?
I'm not totally sure what the idea behind the fuel injector is. My guess is that it's just like a free card you can play off the top that can then like later give you a resource and be a gun counter. I kind of doubt that he's actually using it to fatigue people. It just seems very hard to pull off. I'm not exactly sure what the use case for this card is, but it does strike me as something kind of unusual. I think that his main game plan into fatigue will be like the max velos and backup protocol, maybe setting up some Teclo Pounders to go really tall. And then he also has the end game of one convection amplifier and the 3 hyperscrapper blues to just let him do like a very large dominate. He doesn't have any of the hyperdrivers for hyperscrapper, but you can still just banish items from your graveyard to give it higher power. Like you can just pay X and banish X items, and then it gets plus X. So the idea is you can banish 8 items and come in for like 10 dominate and push your boom grenade over or whatever. So my guess is like that's how he's dealing with fatigue. I think the fuel injector would be kind of hard to do that with, but maybe there's some kind of trick here that I'm missing. Like maybe like you get double fuel injector, then you like Toma Mage Master's Toma Findle. I don't know. I'm not sure.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair.
I guess it's an instant. So I guess fuel injector can let you play a card off the top like on your opponent's turn. That's kind of cool.
It's a card that I was like kind of like excited about in limited, and then it like slowly and definitely went down the ladder of like how good it is every single time I played with it. So yeah, it's kind of interesting to see this card in constructed. You know what? I'm kind of excited to see more of this deck list, and if Fuel Injector stays in the deck list or if it's just like a card that was like not as good, so it may leave the deck list at some point. But I'm not sure because we haven't played with it.
It's a little hard to say from just a glance, but definitely an interesting deck list, and I'd be curious to hear what Tyler's doing with like kind of like all the power cards in the deck and the fuel injectors and the choice for Mage Masters. There's definitely some like interesting deck building choices being made there, and apparently it worked out pretty well for him. So
You know, I'd move on to the next list. It's Even Bridges on KO Armed and Dangerous.
So this deck list doesn't look like anything too crazy. We see AB3 and Spell Fairy Gloves in the equipment, so respecting Kino with AB3 Spell Void 1. There is Gambler's Gloves for Prism, notably. That's kind of it from the equipment. The rest is kind of your usual suspects, Apex, Findles, Hardened Cross Drop for some matchups, Claw, etc. Other than that, we see a move away from yellow agile windups and shifting to just red and blue, which is interesting, but I don't think you can go too far wrong with that. They notably have one smashing performance in here as item hate for some of those mechanologists, and 3 red wild wide, 3 yellow wild ride, and 3 red pulping. So they kind of have like the full go again package. They have 3 no fears in their deck, and they do have the 3 cast bones in their deck. So and as well as the reckless swing. So they've kind of opted to keep in all of the like so-called like power cards, and because I know some people have been like talking about cutting some of these cards, either cast bones or no fears, and yeah, just kind of staying with what I describe as like a very tried and true list. This is not too different from the early KO deck list that we saw. Just like, yeah, E-Strike, 9 draw discards, red Bear Fangs, pretty standard.
Solid, solid. It's basically kind of similar to what you're playing for your PQ seasons.
Yeah, similar to PQ, not dissimilar to Battle Hardened list that I had, honestly, or PT list. Like it's just all fairly standard choices here. Makes a lot of sense. Very, very solid deck list. I don't really have any major critiques. I think KO is like largely solved, and yeah, you can make a few tweaks here and there, and I don't think you can go too wrong as long as you don't like throw the ratios way off or anything, and this deck list doesn't. So
Fair enough. Let's just move on and talk about Jacob Hawkinson's Doranthia Ironsong deck. Which type of Doranthia is this?
So this looks like a dedicated hatchets list. There is no Dawnblade in it, which kind of makes sense. That's a list that we saw do very well at PTLA and have a bit of a breakout performance there. And honestly, this list looks pretty similar. Still has some like Oasis and Take It on the Chin as Kano Hate, a Sigil of Solace in there. All the go again stuff, some shunts. Pretty standard. The one card that maybe stands out to me a little bit is Singing Steelblade. This is not a card that we saw in the PT top 8 list, I don't believe. This is the Dory spec, the 1 cost attack reaction that gives +1 and has reprise and lets you tutor for a attack reaction. Super powerful card. I know people kind of shied away from it because of the like your hatchet Blade Runner hatchet is already 3 resources, so it's hard to find the resource to play this, but the list is on Tunic, so I guess that kind of makes sense. You can use this as a outlet for your Tunic, and otherwise it's still a block 3, and it can let you kind of go grab your powerful cards like Blade Flurry. So kind of a nice inclusion, and I think I like it as a 2 of just because of the awkwardness with the resource curve there.
Wait, that's so gross. Singing Steel Blade, picking up Blade Fury? That's like a 1 for 5.
It is very, yeah. The radon is really strong. It's just a matter of whether it fits into your game plan. It also potentially lets you go over the top better. Like if you're trying to do like a triple swing turn, singing steel blade probably really good for letting you do that. Like because often like if you're swinging your hatchets 3 times, you might need to pitch 2 blues anyways. So then you can just singing steel blade and accept that you're doing that, and that's fine. So yeah, might be good at letting you go like a little bigger and doing 3 attack turns against decks that are trying to block a little more.
Yeah, no, this deck looks solid. This is a deck that I haven't even tried or considered yet.
You should. I think you'd like it. It's just like super solid value deck, blocks really well, always on rate, very consistent. Yeah, pretty good deck. Remembrance is like an interesting choice in here, actually. I hadn't noticed it on first glance, but Remembrance to maybe get back Spellbloods. So like maybe this is just like a way to close games would be my guess. That's kind of a cool piece of tech. 3 Warmongers, maybe respecting like Azalea and Runeblade here, but
Yeah, nothing too out of line. Just very good cards. I feel like I'm there like looking at all the cards in this list, and I'm just like, there's no cards in this deck that I hate. Like just like every card in here is like kind of nice.
and it's just like super redundant. Like you have the 9 Blade Runners, the 9 hit and runs, then you have like 3 Shift the Tide, you have the 3 Glints, and like you just have like so much go again. So like this deck just like almost always has it, and it's one of the nice things about Dory is that when you have multiple sources of go again, if your opponent's not blocking, you can just convert it into 3 swings. Whereas sometimes Kasai can run into the problem of like I have so much go again and I don't have a use for it, and I really want to block with some of these cards to convert them. Whereas Dory can kind of get around that a little bit. So it's sort of the big difference.
Nothing too special about that one. And let's talk about Majin Bei's Kano deck. Man, Majin Bei's been top aiding a lot recently.
Yeah, he's been on a tear. He almost feels like it almost feels like Brody levels of like, like you see like a top 8 in the US and you see Brody, and I feel like it's like almost getting to that case with Majin as well, at least lately. Like he's just been topping so much. So I guess not surprising to see him doing well on Kano, deck that he's played a ton of. There is some stuff to talk about here. I think a lot of people in the Kano community will look at this and say, yeah, this is kind of the way Kano decks are going. The big thing that's happening here, we saw this a little bit in the PT deck, and I think that Julian, I forget his last name, but Julian has been a big proponent of pitch stack Kano in some matchups. So we see Balance of Justice as a choice into KO to let you kind of survive to second cycle and use a bunch of D reacts like Fate Foreseen and Sync Belows, and it looks like 2 Oasis Respites as well, to get to your pitch stack in second cycle. I know some people were also on yellow Sync Belows. It looks like Majin Bei has opted not to be on those. But yeah, regardless, the idea is that you can play a 60 card deck that has no defense reactions and just play your typical Kano gameplay, and that aspect of the deck looks super standard. There's nothing to it's the same Kano deck that we've been seeing for ages, and then the sideboard slots are for the defense reaction package so that you can bide your time to second cycle and then just kind of deterministically kill people with combo in matchups where you feel like you can reliably pitch stack and get to second cycle. So kind of leaning into what we were talking about earlier, that idea of decks being like more setup and combo based to combat the mid-range decks that want to block a lot to get value of their hands and aren't that good at being aggressive. So cool to see that kind of taking off and more people adopting this and doing well with it.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Fair enough. I feel like the only actual aggro deck that we've seen so far, just like talking in this whole episode, is that one dash IO list, right? Every other deck is kind of like a mid range pitch stack or like a mid range pile.
Yeah. KO's like maybe a little bit aggressively canted, but even still is not really like a true aggro deck. So
Yeah, that deck has so many 3 blocks.
yeah, it blocks pretty well and plays small hands pretty well, and then usually sets up like 1 or 2 biggish turns, like like 20-25 damage. Yeah.
It's gross. It's gross. KO should start blocking for 2. That's the next thing, After this season or like this wave of like brute cards with all 3 blocks, I'm just gonna assume that the next wave of brute cards are all gonna be 2 blocks now because it's too good.
Yeah.
let's move on and talk about the last list here, which is Anthony Phams dash IE. This is OG dash. This is just what is this called? Like hybrid dash? Is that what you call it?
Pretty classic hybrid dash list. It looks like he has, let's see, 3 plasma purifiers and only one in chamber. Okay, so opting for 3 purifiers, 1 chamber. So just getting the weapon to be able to go up to that like 4 and 4, and then probably relying on not max velocity, high octane to get the extra action points to shoot a bunch. So that's probably how he's going about dealing with things like Guardian, if I had to guess. There's balance of justice in there, which I think is pretty standard in Dash these days. Your boost game plan is like pretty solid into KO with the balance of justice. I was finding like one of the things that some of the strong dashes would do is they just, you have your blood rush turn and they go block with my balance, no block, no block, no block, draw a card, and then they just go like high octane and they have 6 cards in their hand and you're just like, oh god, like what have I done?
I see, I see. So they use your blood rush against you.
Yeah, they're like blood rush, that means +1 int for me, and you're like, oh no. So kind of sick, honestly. Yeah, looks like they have the D-React and item package. Signal Jammer is a very interesting card I haven't seen. I'm going to read this one out. So, this is the 0 cost blue item that comes in with a Steam counter. And at the beginning of your action phase, you must remove a Steam counter or destroy it. And each hero can't play more than one non attack action card each turn. Kind of curious what this is here for, honestly. Like, maybe.
This has to just be an Azalea tech.
Yeah, I guess this is like Warmongers at home for Azalea, and Azalea is a bad matchup for Dash. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I think this is just a Spark a Genius. It's like a Warmonger, so you can Spark a Genius for. I think this kind of makes sense to not play Warmongers and play Signal Jammer instead if you're really needing to like just Spark a Genius. Like having 5 copies of Warmongers instead of just 3 copies of Warmongers is kind of nice against Azalea.
It also doesn't brick your boost, which is good.
Yeah, that too. That too. There's no generics in this list other than the defense reactions. Yeah, I kind of like Signal Jammer instead of Warmongers. I think that's just what this is for.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I was like, I guess it stops Kano combo, but like Boost Dash is already Kano's like one of Kano's all-time worst matchups. So besides like Prism, I think Prism might be worse.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure this is just an Azalea attack. I thought about Signal Jammer a lot. Every single time I try to play it, I'm just like, oh, this card doesn't block for 3. Not gonna put it in my deck. So
Yeah, I think it probably has a better home in the boost oriented decks where you're trying to be aggressive and maybe you don't care as much about the 3 block, and then Warmongers is better in the tree frog lists where you're not really trying to boost, and so you'd rather just have the 3 block, and it being a mech card doesn't really matter.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, super solid. Okay, yeah, cool to see Dash doing well. She's a hero that I've been like wondering if we're gonna see come back a little bit. It didn't really look like it in the metagame minutes, so maybe it's still not quite her time. I guess the brutes are a little bit rough for you, but yeah.
Yeah, well, Dash doesn't really have a good matchup against anybody. She just has a fair matchup against everyone. So
Mm-hmm,
I
mm-hmm.
kind of don't think she's going to shine this meta unless somebody finds some kind of pitch stack combo with her that's like really powerful with high octanes. But I feel like it's already been explored a lot. And then if the brutes start playing like smashing performances, it can kind of get pretty bad pretty quick. So I don't know if she will ever become like a very strong deck, and if she does, then she'll get like pushed back down pretty easily. I think.
Yeah, she's definitely a deck that can be targeted right now with brutes being so good. So yeah, makes a lot of sense. Anything else you want to talk about with these deck lists or this top 8?
No, I don't think so.
Maybe before we wrap up, how do you feel about this metagame? Are you a fan? Do you like this metagame? Are you excited for MST to shake things up? What do you think?
I'm not a fan of like diverse metagames. I don't know how many people know this, but I really like TCGs having one deck formats. Those are the formats where I end up practicing a lot more, and I practice a lot of the mirror and try and like find the mirror breaker. That's kind of the thing that I like doing. But right now it's a little bit too diverse, so not a fan, but I'm okay with it. There's not, you can kind of bring anything and do well. I think it's really good if you like just wanna. I feel like if you want to have fun playing your ProQuest, you get to play any deck that you want, and then you'll have at least a chance at top eighting.
Yeah, I think that's really well said. This is probably one of the most diverse and well balanced metagames we've ever seen, which I think is really exciting and kind of a breath of fresh air for a lot of people. I also don't know if I like this metagame, not because I necessarily hate open metas, but I just feel like, well, I don't know. We'll see next week, but I feel like a big complaint that I was having was I'm just like I don't like any of these decks. Like KO's good, but he's just like he's okay. I don't know. He's not my favorite. There's nothing that has like I really enjoyed playing Lexi. I really enjoyed playing Icelander, and there's nothing that feels like that for me right now. So I'm sort of like trying to find a deck that I like. So that's maybe like not a critique of the metagame, just like feels it just feels like things are like super mid-range value soup and not very aggressive. There's not very many on hits in the format, and I kind of miss that aspect of FAP. I like on hits. I think they add a lot to the game, and I hope that MST shakes things up. But I'm pretty excited about Prism. She's sort of a deck that maybe doesn't. I guess she does have on hits, but also she like forces people to interact with her board and stuff, which is kind of what I want. Because it's weird. It's weird. Like even though decks are attacking and blocking, it somehow doesn't feel that interactive. Because like Victor blocking you doesn't feel interactive, right? He's just like blocking you because he wants to win his clash and get like 20 value out of his hand and then hit you super hard. And it's
What are
like,
you talking about? Victor is interactive. Like every single time I block with Tesla strength this weekend, I was sweating, bro. Like it's like, man, I'm just like hoping it's not a Tesla strength on top of my deck or a trounce on top of my deck. And like the moment you don't have any gold on your board and you have to block with trounce, oh my god, that's like you're swelling bullets if you're playing against a deck that has actual attacks in their deck, like a KO. Oh my god.
that's fair. There's tension there. I don't know if that counts as interactive though, but yeah, I guess I just feel like decks are kind of like doing their game plan. Like even like the Warriors, they're just like sitting there and they're like, I block to convert the cards in my hand, I attack you with my two hatchets, and then I pass, and then I do the same thing again and again until either you show me that your numbers are better than mine or my numbers are better than yours, and then I don't know. That's that. It's sort of it's okay. I guess like you could always say that maybe FAP is about numbers, but I think when there's like so much armor and so few on hits, it just feels more exaggerated.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. I guess this is like one of the first formats where Snatch hasn't been that good, is it?
Yeah, where's the snatch? Like look at this top eight. Where are the on hits? Which of these decks have on hits? Like none of them. Like I guess like Dash IO if you have Boom Grenade, that's like kind of it. Does this Betsy deck even have on hits?
Yeah, it has on his. It has like a choke slam in there, and it has like bet big that I don't know how it's gonna win the wager, but you know, it has bet big.
I guess there's like CNC pummel. I don't know. There's like sprinkles of it, but by and large, I feel like this is like some of the least amount of on hits we've ever
Oh,
seen.
it's all the Guardians. All the Guardians are playing Command and Conquer Pummel. There you go. On hits.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, clearly the best kind of on hit where you kind of feel like, oh my god, how do I come back from this? But like, you know, have you ever gotten Command and Conquer pummeled with a D react in Arsenal? It's like the worst feeling in the world.
Yeah, it is. It is a classic. Pretty good. I think that's gonna wrap us up. We've rambled on long enough. If you're still here listening, thank you. Hope you enjoyed the show. Hope this helped you get ready for your upcoming PQs. And if you want to get in touch with us, you can do so on social media. I'm at Yukili Bender. Jay is at Ueda J over on Twitter. If you want to email us directly, you can do so at onthebobble@gmail.com and send us your questions and feedback directly there. We also have a Discord associated with our Patreon. So if you want to send feedback there, please do so through the Discord. Or if you have like things that you want to get discussed on the podcast, fundamentals that you want us to go over, whatever, honestly, we'd be super open to suggestions, since this is sort of like, moving into the tail end of the season before we get a new set, and this is kind of like the best time to have those fundamentals episodes. So if you do have suggestions for us, jump over into the Patreon Discord, let us know, and we can dive into that in a future show. All right. Thanks for listening.
Do you have anything for a sign off?
I've been playing Netrunner lately. I've been learning Netrunner. Game pretty fun. It's community run now. So like it was run by Fantasy Flight Games as a living card game. It's been picked up by the community since Fantasy Flight dropped it. And yeah, it's sort of like a anybody that doesn't know Netrunner, it's like a cyberpunk trading card game. It's very unique in that the two sides are not symmetric. You're playing one person plays as the corporation, so you're like a big evil corporation trying to get resources and advance agendas so that you can win the game. And then the other player is playing as the runner, and the runner is basically trying to steal from the corporation or destroy the corporation's stuff and undermine their plans. And yeah, the game is pretty easy to pick up and play. It's a lot of fun, and honestly, it's been like kind of like a good change of pace from Flesh and Blood. Not that I haven't been playing Flesh and Blood as well, but just something to do on the downtime that is a different card game. And yeah, I've been really enjoying it. There's some like really cool. Um, I don't know. The deck building in that game is really sweet, and the kind of there's a lot of like hidden information of like you're trying to like steal from the corporation, but then they can put ice out to stop you and disrupt you from stealing, and lots of bad stuff can happen to you when you try to run through the ice. And so there's a lot of like trying to guess what they have and then trying to find plans to like get through what they have once you figure out what it is. It's pretty neat. Have you played Netrunner at all, Jay?
I've actually never played Netrunner. I have read some cards, but I haven't actually played the game yet. I feel like people like invited me to play a couple times, and then I'm like, yeah, sure, I'll play someday. And then it's been like 2 years. So yeah, I don't know if there's like an event coming up or like some regional type event. I know like most people like just print out the cards and you can just play that, right? Like it's not you don't actually have to buy the cards in that game.
Yeah, apparently you can just like proxy everything. I think there's also like I believe there is organized play and you can play events, but I think that the pricing is like promo cards and stuff. Like there's not a lot of money in the game, but it does have a scene and some very invested people in the game, and honestly the gameplay is pretty fun. My roommate Eli gave us some there's like a starter deck set called I don't know what it's called. It's SG. I don't know what SG stands for. Um, this is a systems gateway, I think. But anyways, it's like a really good starter experience where like you can build these precon decks, and then they also give you some deck building where you can like build different factions, and it feels like they do a good job of like giving you some options so you can customize your deck and make some choices, but also just like maybe like 80% of your deck is like pretty predetermined because like the card pool is pretty small, where you're just like, yeah, I'm gonna play like a bunch of cards from my faction, and then like essentially you have like points that you can spend to like splash other factions, and you can only splash so many cards. So because of the limited card pool, it's just like, I splash like 7 cards or so, and I have like some generics, and then I play my faction cards, and that's kind of my deck. So it feels like a good way to like try things out, but not having like like way too many cards, and it's too hard when you're starting out.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, yeah, that's I'm interested in playing it, but like I've never had the actual like a real reason to start playing it, or like I haven't had a day where I'm like I'm gonna sit down and play this game. But maybe that's gonna someday it'll happen. I still
Yeah,
believe I still believe it's gonna happen someday.
yeah, maybe we can sit down and play sometime. It's pretty fun. I think I know the rules well enough at this point. Yeah.
Yeah, if you bring it to like an armory or something, the only problem is like every single time recently on Armory days, I keep on forgetting that it's Armory Day, and it'll be like 3 a.m. I'll be like, it was a Monday night. I missed Armory. Oh,
That's fair. That does make it hard to play after Armory.
yeah. It's like so often I wake up and it's like, oh, it's 4 a.m. I think I missed something, and I check the date, and it's like, oh wow, it's a Tuesday now. I guess it was a Monday yesterday, and that's happened to me this week. Yeah, it was like we usually record on Tuesdays, and I'm just like, I woke up randomly in the middle of the night. I look at the date, and I'm like, oh my god, Yuki, I need to message her to set up the time to record the podcast. I completely missed that it was a weekday. I thought it was a Sunday still. But yeah, it's my days are kind of messed up nowadays.
That's fair. That's fair.
Yeah, I haven't been awake at like between 10 a.m. and 5 p.m. in this last like week or two, so kind of crazy.
Right.
Okay, just wrap it up then.
Yeah. Thanks for listening, everyone. Have a good night.
Yeah, good night.